So we're here to solve this Heyawake by Prasanna Seshadri called Winner Is You. Heyawake is a puzzle style that originated with Nikoli, but with strictly rectangular cages. And maybe 10 plus years ago, I first explored changing the region shapes to be more wacky, and Heyawake or other names were used in the interim. But the best puzzle constructors have further pushed those bounds. Now cases where even like loose bold edges are put within the grid, but still within obvious cage shapes. This is Heyawake is the best of the world we're publishing in, and so we're using the original name, but with the the rules having the design flexibility to have more than rectangular cages. There are more puzzles like this in the Shading Variety collection, and we're really happy to have Prasanna's Friday puzzle here, which gives examples like the 11 he wrote in that book of really pushing the Heyawake style in interesting ways. I'm going to start in this upper left cage, not because it's the easiest place to start, but it's just a place that draws my eye, in part where I see key tension in the Heyawake grid. You can't cross more than two bold edges, so we can't take these three cells together. We can't take these three cells together. And we're in a cage that has sort of two cells as an issue. So I sort of have to have some cell in this range being shaded, some cell in this range being shaded. And those are actually forced pretty quickly if I can't take these three or these three to be a centrally shaded cell. Either this cell or this cell being shaded will relieve that tension. If I shade it over here, I have three in a row, that's an issue. I'd have to put another in this row, and then I don't have any boxes left to deal with the tension in the other rows. So start of this puzzle can be marking that these are two shaded cells, and my notation of an X is one of these is shaded and the other is unshaded, and this kind of pattern will always form a checkerboard of some sort, like this or this. First thing that means is everything else in this grid is unshaded, but if you're very familiar with Heyawake, what it also means now that I've got an unshaded boundary that's got another set of bolts around it, knowing that one of these cells is actually unshaded, is I will have to shade one of these cells. And let me just sort of show you why. Like again, if this is the pattern, this is shaded, so the one that's in the same row as the unshaded cell. If this is the pattern, this must be shaded. So Heyawake clues propagate across edges quite quickly in some patterns, and this is one I know well from seeing it before. It's also the case for the same rationale that down here is this X clue. Whichever of these cells is unshaded will have a shaded cell two below it. The N in its middle stretches has the same constraints now as the W did above. And again, I'm going to need to have one shaded cell in blue and one shaded cell in this row in blue. And I also have the constraint I can only have three. So again, it's going to have to be in these middle ranges to deal with the tension of not taking all three of these and not taking all three of these. So I will come back and mark in this X pattern. And in doing that, quickly can get that the first and fourth columns through these boxes unused, this eighth row unused in the space. And so a lot of unshaded cells that now give me my first sure shaded cells, like here and here. So let's go back to our sure form of gray. That's because we have long stretches that can't cross this edge without a shading. That marks these in. These two being shaded start to give us this quick cascade of these because this cell being shaded. This unshaded means these are the cascade, which means this is the cascade. One of the nice fun things in Heyawake are these fast cascades when you make good progress. Just as in Sudoku, when you get fast cascades, don't go too far before you check that you've marked all the things you just learned. And I'm going to just do that inventory here. I marked in these cells, so this is one that's now nearby a space with an edge. I marked in these, so this is now nearby. And notice I'm not yet marking off the unshaded cells because I just want to be watching when I do it. So here, I actually do know something more there. Marking this in, looks okay. I actually can't take both of these cells, so I'll mark in an X. This is unshaded, that's okay. I can't take both of these cells. I can't take both of these cells. This is a place where having marked that X notation visually should give you some prompts, like the X's push into each other. And so if I did take the cell, I take the cell and I isolate this cell in the grid. So I have learned to see this pattern quite quickly as needing this to dodge up. It doesn't tell me anything about this one yet, but it tells me this dodges up, and then handling the fact that these cells have to stay in a separate group. It puts these in, that now puts this as the places where we have to have these bold lines to, these bolded squares to avoid crossing an extra edge. This is there for connectivity. This doesn't have tension yet. This is fine, this is fine. This gives me two, puts in this, puts in these. So that looks like great progress. I haven't considered that this is a 6 cage, so let's do that now. I've got 4 boxes marked. This is 5, this is 6. There's no other way that goes. That marks in this edge. That X now gives me this 1 in this box, so everything else is unshaded. This is shaded, unshaded, but now this has to be marked in. Got this 2, don't want another crossing, so I got good tension there. 4 of the 5 in this box, I'll keep that in mind. I need to shade at least one of these cells. Around this 4, going through this one box, it can't sort of enter and exit without a shaded cell, so this looks required. This 4 also has now a counting constraint. It's got 1 box in, it can get a 2nd here, and a 3rd and 4th must be shaded for that to work. These 2 cells now give me this, and so I'm isolating parts of the grid here, which is telling me I have to come through this lower left corner for all the unshaded cells to stay disconnected. Sorry, just stay connected, not disconnected. And that gives me this pattern with a checkerboard shading where I've got a closed form, like this would be bad, it closes off the grid, and an open form. And Heyawake is often always driven by going to the open forms of these things. I guess I didn't start with an area that might be one of the easier areas to get started, which is around the 0. Again, a Heyawake deduction is that there's going to be an alternate pattern on these other edges around this interior 0 where I may shade this cell. That marks this one as unshaded, which means I have to shade this cell to have the rules forced, so that you can see around the 0 that the top and bottom edge will always have shaded cells. These are forced. If I didn't have the 3 number in this cage, there is an option where both of these cells are shaded, but notice there's no option where neither of them are shaded. So I guess what I can mark in a different kind of notation is blue or red are shaded, but notice I've now completed 3 cells marked in this cage, and everything else will have to be unshaded. And in doing that, I'm setting up some tension that will resolve the rest of this cage quickly. This and this are straddling a divide, so this must be shaded. Putting this unshaded means this moves to the left. These 2 together mean this gets shaded. This now whole stretch requires blue and not red to be shaded for there to be 3, so we finish this set. This coming down forces this cell to be marked in. Let's see if we got more coming up. These 2 here force this shall be shaded. That marks this unshaded. That forces this to be shaded. We have connectivity issues if we don't come through this channel. But notice we have an issue if we don't shade one of these cells. And notice in this box we have an issue if we don't shade one of these in blue. So that intersection is where there'll be the last of the 4 shaded cells in the set. Everything else in green. That looks okay for connection. Connectivity still requires taking this cell, and with this cell unshaded based off what's near it, got a shade in this. Marks these in white. This will have to be shaded so that the unshaded work together. That now forces a constraint here. For connectivity, I got to come through these. And now I'm left with just needing to shade one of these X's, one of those X's. Again, I have a closed form, which is that, or the open form, which shades in the cell. And the last is unshaded to keep the whole grid connected. So pretty good Heyawake workout, a really fun puzzle, and it shows examples of how Prasanna pushed the genre with the design rules relaxed from the original Niccoli style. And many more puzzles like this from the Shading Variety collection Prasanna wrote that we just published on Sunday. So check out the links below if you're curious for more Heyawake. Thanks, and we'll see you again soon.